Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Hey, on the Alex Garrett Podcast Network, if you want to wake up with some inspiration, you got to tune to my next guest Twitter page, okay? You got to tune in to a guy I just met literally a few days ago. We've been following each other for a while. Then I reached out and I said, look, Matt Nelson, you are a PA announcer and a seventh inning stretch singer and a NASCAR fan. And of course, you're also a fellow ECC public address announcer with the St. Thomas Aquinas College Spartans. Reminder, I'm going to have my Queens College baseball coach, Chris Reardon, on this week to discuss their first ever NCAA tournament win. How cool is that? And a guy that is familiar with ECC baseball is one Matt Nelson, because hell, dude, we both announce the sport we love, don't we?
I mean, I wouldn't say baseball is like at the top. I love all sports, but definitely one of them. So, yeah, congratulations again on Queens College getting an NCAA tournament win.
I know I'm kind of bearing the lead on why your tweets are inspirational, but look, anybody who has any kind of disability doesn't want to be looked at as disabled, but you do have an hashtag autistic announcer. You do these hashtags every day, which just inspired me to bring you on. So firstly, as a voiceover artist with autism, were there any challenges you had getting into this business?
I would say that when I first got into public address announcing, I knew that I was autistic, but it really didn't dawn on me as to like what exactly I share that other autistic people, not just in this country, but throughout the world, go through on a day-to-day basis. So I really wasn't aware of some of the challenges I was going to have to face early on. I think about a year ago, when I made it public that I was on the autism spectrum, which we'll, I'm sure, talk about later on, I didn't realize how much attention it would get, not only from some people that I work with in the sports industry, but other people who are autistic throughout this world, realizing, oh my gosh, there's a guy out there who works in sports. He has such a unique position, and it's very unique that he's now coming out about this at the last I checked, when I opened up about this, I was 31 years old. So now I'm 32.
Wow. So you were born about a few months earlier than me, because I'm going to be 32 this year. Go. Let me ask you this, though. When you say a shock, why did you hide it for so long? Were you worried you were going to be differently? What was the reasoning for holding back on this?
Excellent question. So several years ago, when I was doing a lot of play-by-play broadcasting, I thought, okay, maybe I should at least reveal some information to some of my clients. That way they're aware of some of the unusual traits that I present. But back then, I used the term Asperger's. So for people who may not be familiar with this, Asperger's was removed from the DSM-5 model about a decade ago. It's something that is used to classify certain types of autism. But when that move was made, Asperger's became non-existent. So when I tell people that, I'm autistic, I just leave it at that. I've also learned that Asperger's can be an offensive term used within the autistic community, because way back in the days of Hitler, there was a gentleman named Hans Asperger who invented the term. And I think it's probably wise for people to Google him and find out like why he was such a bad influence on the autistic community. When I publicly went open about it on social media, I think there were other clients, like active clients that I have right now out there, that I think found it very interesting that I went public about this. And I think for people who haven't asked me about it, I think they're wise enough not to, because I think they now have a better understanding of what I have and the fact that I should be treated as human like everyone else, and not, like someone who's considered special, which I prefer that term is not used. I prefer that I'm different, not special.
So many follow-ups to what you just said, because I want to go from there was mass hysteria, meaning did the press outlets call you up? Oh my God, you're an autistic announcer. Can you come on? You're such an inspiration. And also you say it's better that they don't ask, yet your Twitter hashtag is asking autistic. So I think it's kind of interesting you say that. But let me go for the first one. Did press outlets start coming to you and saying, hey, we want to talk to you about this?
I think the first time I got asked to be interviewed about my autistic journey and what I do for a living was actually about a month ago. So obviously it wasn't right away, but I think once I opened up publicly on social media, it got the attention of a lot of people who are also on the spectrum, that are on Twitter, eventually on Instagram. And yeah, here we are a year later, and my Twitter followers have gone up by 1.5 times, which is pretty impressive.
Are you naturally verified, or were you a sucker like me and pay the $8 a month? I gotta ask.
Are you talking about the blue? Are you talking about the blue check mark?
Yes, I am.
No. At this rate, I do not want to pay Elon Musk, who also is autistic, from what I understand. I am not willing to pay him $8 a month just to have a blue check mark. That is absolutely ridiculous. And for people who actually have the money, or companies who have the money, great. I don't think it's worth it. I would probably be against using it at this rate. I'll just let my number of followers go up as they please, especially if I start to follow more and more people, not only on Twitter, but also Instagram as well.
You mentioned to me, it looks like you're following a lot more people who are autistic. And I don't see it as that. I just see it as you guys are part of the community that smashes stigmas. I wrote that to you directly because I feel like we do wake up with a sort of a different routine, or different than maybe the normal person would, right? So we're smashing stigmas every day. I don't know if you feel that, but I hope you do, because we're all achieving something that the world's very interested in, I guess.
I mean, I would not use the word normal in this kind of interview, because if you think about it, like, I don't think anyone on this planet is considered a form of normal. And the one thing people who don't know much about autism need to realize is that people who are autistic love routines.
Okay.
For me, because I work in such a unique industry, I have to learn how to adjust and adapt to things. For example, this interview was supposed to be taped about an hour ago, but of course you gave me a little bit of heads up notice, so I had to make certain adjustments on my end in order to, make sure that we can make this work. As far as working in the industry itself, if I work an outdoor sporting event, for example, I've got to be prepared if weather is in the forecast. How is that going to affect me? Because then I have to learn how to make adjustments on my end to where it's like, okay, if someone decides to, post another opening online or reach out to me directly, then depending on the compensation and such and the logistics, including, travel, food, tolls, parking, if that's involved, I got to think, okay, I got to quickly adjust to another sporting event that just got offered. Or I have to adjust to the fact that I have a rare day off, especially if it's a Saturday.
Well, yeah, our Saturdays are pretty busy when you're announcing. But on this adaptability thing, I feel like you're talking from experience, meaning, yeah, it did throw you off. If there was some rain in the forecast at a baseball game or something unforeseen even in a basketball game. So what kind of things would throw you off, and do they still throw you off?
I wouldn't say they throw me off. So if I did use that term, I apologize, is the fact that I have to learn how to make those adjustments on the fly and realize, okay, what am I going to do if something like that were to happen? Obviously, the sports where you would mainly have rainouts or rain postponements would be baseball, softball, soccer, and lacrosse, and the rare chance I do field hockey. Those are the types of sports that don't necessarily get rained out. But if there's rain in the area and the forecast is also calling for thunder and lightning, you got to be able to adapt to the fact that the game has to stop for a certain period of time because of that lightning radius. Like, for example, there are certain sports where if lightning is within an 8-mile radius of the venue, the refs have to stop play and then set a timer to like 30 minutes before they can resume play. Obviously, if there are more lightning strikes or more rumbles of thunder, then that clock has to reset from the moment that next lightning strike or rumble of thunder hit. So fortunately, I work with clients that pay attention to the weather on a pretty consistent basis. That way they can plan ahead and figure out, okay, can we play earlier or later in the day? Can we play, for example, if I have a 3-game baseball series that consists of 3 days, can we play 2 games in one day on that same field? Or do we have to go to another field that is not being used? That actually happened to me this past weekend because I'm the voice of Manhattan College baseball, and just about every single Division I college here in the U.S. was wrapping up their regular season. They had to do it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Because of certain conference rules that are in place, and because Manhattan also shares that same baseball field with a minor league baseball team who was playing weekend series, I think it was Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon, there was rain in the forecast for Saturday. So they not only had to think about, okay, when are we going to play, games 2 and 3 of this series, but is this going to impact the minor league team if we play 2 games before they got to take the field for their batting practice? So they had to go to a neutral site location to play. And because I was not paid by Manhattan, I was paid by a gentleman named Jim Houston, who's the control room supervisor of Clover Stadium. My needs were not called on. So I had Friday off and I had Saturday off during the daytime, which was extremely rare. But given how busy I was between September and mid-May, I didn't mind having a little bit of time off before I rolled into soccer season.
That's interesting. So you don't mind if scheduling mishaps happen, or does it bother you a little bit? I got to ask.
I guess it depends on how you find out, because, and this goes back to the Manhattan series I had this past weekend. I went down onto the field to get pronunciations from the head coach from the opposition. In this case, it was Rider University. And I noticed that one of the kids on their roster had 2 different numbers. It all depends on what color jersey he wears. So he was going to wear 1 jersey for Thursday and then wear 1 jersey for Friday. So then I asked the coach the question of, okay, what jersey number is he going to wear Saturday? He's like, we're not playing Saturday. Without going into detail, he found out that things were going to change a little bit due to the weather. When I went back into the booth, I asked the sports information contact from Manhattan if there was going to be any schedule changes, and he told me yes, but nothing is official. He told me some of the details that I was not able to reveal at the time until it became public on Manhattan's website. So in this instance, I knew deep down to make sure that if I tell people that they can't really, get the word out themselves, because you don't want information scattered from an unreliable source. And I've made that mistake in the past by, putting something out there before it goes public by the proper people.
Now, remind me, Clover Stadium, is that the one in Rockland, or am I totally out to lunch on that?
If you mean Rockland County, yes, that is the home of the New York Boulders and the Frontier League.
There you go. And I of course stack plays up there as well. But Matt, I've got to ask you this, because you just mentioned numbers, and my dad, who actually just passed away, always instilled in me, get the numbers right, get the pronunciations right? I only ask that because if the autism affects your desire to want the details, every detail, unlike as it might affect any public address announcer, but does it affect you even more, I guess is my question.
I don't think being autistic affects me as an announcer unless something is building up in my mind to the point where I have to do everything to try and mask myself so that I'm not really showing what it is that I'm going through. I feel like there were times where it may have happened once or twice this past season, and I just had to adapt to getting through that certain part of the game before my mind can slowly start to unravel itself and be like, okay, you're getting back to, game focus. Now it's time to really grind and get to the end of the game. That way no one can really see like what it was that I'm going through or went through.
Like what would build up inside you? Oh my God, I might say the wrong player's name. Like what kind of buildup would be inside your brain?
It's first of all, it's rare for me nowadays, given how many years I've announced games, to say the wrong player. It happens once in a blue moon, and I have to quickly realize, oh, shoot, I said the wrong last name. It actually happened once or twice this past season during a college basketball game. And I remember saying to myself, why in the world did I just say that? It really dawned on me as soon as I said the wrong person's name. Their incorrect last name. I don't know where I got it from, but it just somehow came out. There are also times where if I'm working 3 to 4 games single day at the same location, that's really where the mentality starts to either change negatively, or because I'm in such a groove, then I'm able to focus, and it doesn't really feel like I'm phased out at all.
Why I like this conversation is I still feel like you're making the point that autism doesn't truly affect the game day experience for you. And that's the important thing to say, is that, hey, don't be afraid. If Matt Naslund has autism, he's still going to bring his A game every game. It's not going to affect the game day experience for you, right?
I think nowadays what I've learned is that as I go deeper and deeper into a season, whether it's in the fall, winter, or spring, the more comfortable I get, especially if I'm working with a new boss or I'm working with new people that operate in a way that I'm not necessarily familiar with. I feel like in the past, if I'm working with the same people from year to year, then I can remember things that will transition a little more quickly. I think when someone is autistic, it takes a little bit longer than someone who's neurotypical to process what a new person is directing you to do, or is telling you if you're just having a regular conversation with them. as the voice of the Metropolitan Riveters, I had to make the adjustment of going from a 2021-22 season where we had, at the time, it was a new GM and some returning staff members from years past, to this past season where we were not only in a brand new venue, we had a team president who we did not have my first season. We had a new general manager. And then we had a third member of the front office. And I say that loosely because he was only able to work the first half of the season because it was basically to help the Riveters get the ground running.
Mind us who the Riveters are. What sport is this, by the way?
This is women's professional hockey in the Premier Hockey Federation.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. He was only with us for the first half of the season. So then once he left, everyone had to get used to the fact that we were not going to have the same number of bodies on hand when it came to staff, which meant some people behind the scenes were going to have a little bit more responsibilities than they did, say, from November until sometime in early to mid-January. You know, they were going to have a little more responsibilities for those final 2 or 3 months of hockey season. So I think, you know, working with new clients, sometimes it definitely takes some time to get used to working with them, especially since everyone has a different way of going about their way of working on game days. But what I've learned is that if you're comfortable around them and you consider them trustworthy, which is definitely a major thing when it comes to, you know, communicating and working with autistics, then things are going to run a little more smoothly. When I got promoted at FDU to announce their men's and women's basketball games, it was definitely a little bit of a transition for me, even though I was familiar with the people I worked with.
That's
the
how
environment was going to be different. And that meant because I was doing Division I basketball now, there's even more pressure on me.
I was wondering how we connected. Now I know. I think it was because I followed you during your FDU run when you were like, hey, guys, I announced this team. I announced the team that upset a Purdue team. And by the way, FDU had the former coach of Stack. I mean, it's all a small world.
Delvin Anderson, yes. And now it's really the first time I found out that I was going to be filling in for an FDU game. This is before they, officially asked me to take over. I realized that the head coach of the men's team was formerly at Stack for over 20 years. So I knew there was a connection between us.
And then you announced them because they had transfers also.
Yes. Yeah. There were about 2 or 3 players that transferred from Stack to FDU. And now Dimitri Roberts, who was one of those transfers, declared his eligibility for the NBA draft, which I think is phenomenal.
Man, I could talk ACC all day with you, but I've got to ask you this. And by the way, kudos to Bob Dranoff while we're on the subject. Love the guy, great commissioner of the conference. But while we're on the subject of announcing, at what point did you realize that public address announcing is a vital part of game day operations? Because it is. And we kind of walk in there sort of humbled, I think. But then when the mic comes on, we just got to light it up in the or the stadium, right?
Yeah. I mean, from the moment I first got on the PA mic, which if I think about it now, it was back in December 2016. Imagine how far back I remember that day. But I think it eventually took me a while, maybe I would say less than 2 years to figure out just how vital the announcer position is on game day, because we're the ones making sure the crowd's fired up when a big moment happens, whether it's a game-winning home run, a massive one-handed dunk, if it's a game-winning goal in hockey, or let's say, the goal happens during a shootout or an overtime. If it's the home team, obviously, you got to learn how to fire up the crowd. Otherwise, the atmosphere doesn't really have a vibe going. So, yes, it's vital to get the reps, make connections, and ultimately find the clients that are going to help you get to where you want to be.
And I would say patience, right? Bosses that are patient with you, that can give you time to grow within the position. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
I started at 17. Let me tell you, I felt so disorganized. It was windy in softball and the line cards are blowing everywhere. By senior year, I got it together though, right? So it takes that patience. But that brings me to my next question. Did you do this in undergrad? Did you do this at Rowan, your alma mater, or no?
No. I went to Rowan and Mercer County Community College for broadcasting because I wanted to be a play-by-play person. I wanted to have similar positions to like guys like Mike Joy, who does NASCAR on Fox, guys like Joe Buck, Mike Tirico, the list goes on and on. Obviously, Brent Musburger too. And that's what I eventually got myself into a little bit more consistently the year after I graduated. Long story short, when I graduated from Rowan, I had a freelance position working for a newspaper in my hometown, which is East Windsor, New Jersey, where I would try and do like 1 or 2 stories a week on average. But I got my first broadcasting opportunity post-college, working with the minor league baseball team that ultimately did not work out for the full season. I bounced around for several years. I even tried my hands working in sports information during a very difficult time in my life where my mother had just been diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And I realized not only because of what was going on back home, but because of the type of personality my boss had, that this was not going to work out for me beyond the 6 months that I was going to be in this position with this college. Like I said, I bounced around way too much as a broadcaster. I really didn't see much growth, even though I did everything I possibly could to listen to myself. Even when making my own demos, I didn't have someone do it for me. I basically edited files that I received from all these schools. But it eventually made me realize I'm not cut out to be a play-by-play person. It's time to try something else. And eventually, once I got into public address announcing, I weaved my way slowly out of broadcasting to the point where I told myself, you are not broadcasting any more games. The amount of time it takes to prep is not made for someone like me. And it's time to realize that being a public address announcer could serve you well long term.
So that's an adaptation right there, right? Because, and I walked into the sports world thinking the same thing. I was ambitious. I went from college to wanting to apply to different colleges to be their announcer and different things across the country to be the announcer, play-by-play guy. And then radio in New York popped up. So I kind of had to broaden my horizon. Like it sounds like you like had to when it comes to public address announcing, which is great. Matt, did you feel that with this diagnosis of autism, and I hate saying that because I don't know, it's just an evil word to say diagnosis, but with this revelation that you had autism, let me put it that way. How old were you firstly?
Okay, this is a story that a lot of people are going to find very unique. And I've told this to a number of people in the past. And it still sickens me to this day exactly what happened.
Okay.
The story I was told was that when I was about 5 years old, a member of my mom's side of the family noticed some unusual traits and pointed out to my parents that, hey, maybe you need to see if your son is autistic. So eventually my mother bought the idea of taking me to a doctor and explaining what happened. Eventually that doctor said, your son has, and again, this was way back in the 90s, a mild case of autism. Nowadays, you're either autistic or you're not. You don't have a mild case or a severe case. You're either autistic or you're not. So when her and I came home from the doctor, she broke the news to my dad. His response was, I don't want to deal with this. And it didn't take me until last year to realize that I need to understand what it is that I have, not just by doing research, but also by following people on social media who have the same disability or ADHD, which I also have. So I can get a better understanding of how we're different. And I think it was eye-opening knowing what I have several years after unexpectedly finding out.
So did you play sports? What I'm trying to say is, did you experience life knowing you had it? And the answer is no, because you didn't know. You just kind of realized it as years went on. And so, did you play sports growing up?
Yeah, I played recreational soccer for many years until I maxed out by way of age.
Okay.
I also think that because I was autistic, it was one of the many reasons why I grew up not having many friends. I was fortunate to have a very select few, but not like real close friends that I would see, every week. One of those friends I actually had to let go of earlier this year because I think partially because of being autistic, and the other part of it has to do with the fact that I don't think he believed that I'm going to have a successful voiceover career, which I will admit it's been difficult for me to make the time to market myself because of the hours I work at my day job and the amount of announcing I had to take on when FDU decided to give me more sports. I think as a result, there will definitely be some changes coming, as I've already mentioned on social media. Well, I'll get into the details at a later day this week. That I'm going to make the time to start making those changes. I don't know how it's going to affect things over the next several months or years or whatever, but I need to make these changes in order to have a better quality of life and realize that my talents are not just used for public address announcing, but also as a voiceover artist, regardless of what genres I get myself into.
By the way, we're talking with Matt Nelson, Matt Nell 23 on Twitter, speaking of social media. So now we got to direct people to your Twitter so they can tune in to find out what the big announcement is.
I am on Linktree. That's where you can find links to all my social media, as well as my two websites. I have one strictly for voiceover and the other is specifically for the sports industry. So that's where they can find the latest in what I'm going, of what I have going on. I do at some point in the off season plan to update it with some reels during my time from FDU, from the Riveters, probably for some other stuff as well, especially since I do work nearly year round. But that's where you can find me on Linktree.
When a team wins, do you feel like you're part of that winning? I feel like as an announcer, we're part of that. No matter where we are, if we're on the sidelines or not, we're part of it because they involve us as the athletic department. They involve public address announcers in a big way.
I don't see why you wouldn't feel like you're part of the winning atmosphere. Whether you just won a regular season game over a team that you knew you had to beat because it was a must win, whether it's the top two teams in the conference, whether you just clinched a playoff spot, or if you just won a postseason tournament game that's going to take you to that next stage in the postseason. You're going to be part of that winning atmosphere no matter what.
And Matt Nelson, I see that you're winning. One last thing, because I got to touch on it. You mentioned that employers should not be afraid to hire people of autistic and of any other disabilities. Have you connected with other autistic announcers that you want to shout out right now?
I think the only autistic announcer out there, and I apologize if I get the last name wrong. I probably have to search him on Facebook, but he's in Wisconsin. I think it's Jim Gahn. That's spelled Gahn. He does a lot of high school public address announcing in the Wisconsin area. He's the only other public address announcer that I know of that is on the autism spectrum. So I hope he's eventually going to be tuning into this podcast, especially this episode. I really do wish that there were more autistic people who are working in the sports industry. There's a very select few of them. And I was actually fortunate enough to meet one of them while I was doing FDU basketball this past season. She just graduated as a graduate assistant, so she has her master's. So Allison Hogue, who I know did some PA announcing, even though it wasn't, a main part of her job. Wish you all the best. Hoping you get that next big sports info job.
Love that. Speaking of girls, real quick, dating with autism, yes, no, good experience, bad experience. Tell me.
Oh, God.
Let's talk personal for a second.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing up the most interesting topics I don't think I've ever spoken about on a podcast. I have not dated a soul in about 5 years. And this was before I opened up about, being autistic and whatnot. So the two girlfriends I had, both in the same year, not at the same time, they were both neurotypical, but didn't work out in the long haul. At some point in the future, I would like to reconsider dating, but only limit it to autistics or neurodivergents, because I feel like because our brains are wired differently from the rest of society, it may allow them to better understand what I've been through in the past and what I go through right now.
Well, this is why I'm asking autistics, okay? Because I want to know the inside perspective on this. And Matt Nelson, you've given us a big one tonight. And your final message, and I know you've kind of repeated it, but your final message to those who even want to be in the sports world but have autism. We've talked about employers. What about the people that want to be, that are aspiring to do this, like you're doing it over at FDU and then Stack? What's your message to those aspiring to be in this business?
That are solely on the autism spectrum or just in general?
Oh yeah, on the autistic side specifically, for sure.
I would say that if you find something in sports that you're passionate about, don't let your disability hold you back, because you don't want to have someone look at you and say, oh, you're using that as a crutch against you. No, you're not. You're using that as a way to look at the world differently and point things out that maybe someone else doesn't see. And I think the skill set that I've had has given me a chance to, have the number of clients that I have in sports nowadays. If you find something that you're passionate about, go for it. Don't stop. Don't give up. Go for your dreams and show the world what you're capable of, no matter what it is that you have.
I got to have a little humor here, because did you say crutch? I got one right here. So,
Oh God. I can't believe you just showed that.
Matt Nelson, this has been a blast. Please do come back. I could see your announcing load's a little lighter now at the moment, but where can we expect you this summer?
So this summer, I will be spending it at Rider University, Real Central NJ, which is a pre-professional soccer club in USL2 and the WPSL. That's short for Women's Premier Soccer League. We just moved there as part of it being our new home venue. We just had our first 3 games, 2 USL and 1 WPSL games. And in spite of the fact that we had some iffy weather on Saturday before Saturday night's game, I would say the turnout that we've had from a fan's perspective has been worth it. And we've already decided that we made the right move going from Mercer County Community College to Rider. So it's definitely, it's been an enjoyable 3 games, and we're only looking to build from there.
Matt, before I let you go, I got to know if you can do one intro for me, even from FDU, because I remember back in the day, I loved doing good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the campus of Queens College for today's East Coast Conference matchup between the St. Thomas Aquinas College Spartans and your Queens College Knights.
Okay, so I will. The school I'm going, the opposition I'm going to reference,
Okay.
They actually no longer have athletics. If you follow college athletics closely, you'll probably heard of this school. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Stratus Arena inside the Rothman Center for tonight's Northeast Conference men's basketball game between the visiting St. Francis Brooklyn Terriers and your FDU Knights. Yeah, it was a shame when I found out that St. Francis Brooklyn was getting rid of their athletics department entirely, even though they just added, like, I think it was women's soccer 2 or 3 years ago.
Matt, I noticed you have a lot of connections in New Jersey, but you're New York based, or where are you based out of?
Technically New Jersey.
Ah, got you. Well, there you go. Well, from the Empire State to the Garden State, announcing the love of public address announcing doesn't have any boundaries, right? And neither does having a disability and the love of announcing. Not a boundary there either. And that's what Matt Nelson is proving each and every game he announces. Matt, thanks so much for joining us on the Alex Garrett Sports Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Alex.